afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 6 of Wowhead Weekly. We've had a huge week this week. We've had the cinematic, we've had the release date announcement, we've had a ton of interviews at Gamescom, we've had troll models, and we've even had a new build. And I abandoned Perk for some of this, but she's here with me right now, my co-host Perculia. Welcome back. Man, we have had a heck of a week. Right?
Yes, I am super excited, relieved about the release date. 3 months to keep fixing the database.
Oh my god, yeah, exactly. Like 3 months, that's fantastic. So let's start with that, actually. Let's start with the release date. So we heard yesterday at the cinematic reveal that it was going to be November 13th. So Perk, now we talk about this sort of stuff internally a lot. Like you'd kind of called this one pretty early on, right? What was your reasoning? What was your reasoning behind it?
So my reasoning was that I was comparing it to all the prep I was doing for Mr. Pandaria and just sort of noticing where we were then versus now and how things like profession guides I had written, like July for MOP, but I wasn't really starting on them until now, and there's even lots of information I'm still missing. And things like raid items, I always start doing different coding for like transmog sets and item sets and 3D models, and we don't have a lot of that data yet, and we always would get that midsummer for Mr. Pandaria, which was in late September. So using that as a benchmark, there's a lot of things I couldn't really start working on quite yet, in addition to, all the new character models being, playable, or like level 3 garrisons, or these changes to challenge modes. So I was thinking it was a ways off, and then I'm like, well, it can't be in late October because what's going to happen to BlizzCon, especially if they want these world-first people to be gathered together, hyping it up and doing their live raids. So that's why I was thinking it would be 6.0 before BlizzCon. If you have stuff to do, great. If you're bored, well, you got BlizzCon to look forward to, and then launch it right after.
Yeah, exactly. And as it happens, that's precisely what's going on. So we obviously heard the release date of November 13th. So that presumably means, based on everything we've heard in the past, that the pre-patch, the 6.0 pre-patch, is going to be coming on around October 13th. I wouldn't be surprised. Now, Tom Chilton actually mentioned in the interview, which we posted up on the site today from Vanian, that the reason why it was a Thursday release date, which I think everyone sort of went, that's weird.
Yeah.
It's simply because Armistice Day is on a Tuesday of that week. So the 11th of November in the UK particularly, and also in the EU is of course Poppy Day. That's the day we remember the war. So it's a big national holiday. And of course, like, gamers don't mind having an expansion release on a national holiday. Like, we'd actually be pretty stoked about that, I think. Like, I'd be pretty happy. It's like, oh, I've got an automatic day off work. But French labour laws mean that the Blizzard France office, the Blizzard EU office, wouldn't be allowed to work on that day.
Also, there'd be a lot of BlizzCon cleanup. I mean, I'm flying back that Monday night, so that'd be bad if it happened the day after.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got a bunch of people flying back. We've also got Armistice Day. So he basically said that was the reason why it was the Thursday. So I would imagine that we'd see the 6.0 pre-patch launching on the Tuesday. So I would reckon that's going to be, I think that would be around October 14th or something like that. I don't remember the day exactly, but I think we could definitely expect that to be the case given the month before that they've been talking about for so long.
Yeah, and as it gets closer, we'll have a guide up, of course, to everything that is going away in 6.0. So,
exactly. We were talking today.
Modes, mountains, all that.
All the things that you need to get done before that date in October. So absolutely, we'll definitely be getting that up. And of course, the exciting thing that we saw was the cinematic. So, Perk, what did you think?
So, I mean, well, I was going to ask you what you thought seeing it in person, but for me, watching it at home, hovering on the news to be the first person to, break the news on Twitter and Facebook and everywhere, there was a lot of build-up. We heard all about these boosted 90 characters and a lot of PvP and garrisons, and I think they were trying to sell to people that hadn't been playing for a while, especially the boosted characters. And then we saw Lords of War, and then we saw the zone preview, which I thought was really well done and put together. And then finally we saw the cinematic, which, I thought it was very technically awesome put together, great sound effects, great high definition. But I think some people also on Twitter thought it was a little unclear. Was this like a retcon of the orcs? Like, how do you understand this time travel? Yeah. And I think people wanted sort of more variation in the races and the characters. Like in Mr. Pandaria, you had the Alliance and like the Horde character with the panda.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Like the obviously it's very different, and it's interesting to hear like the different sides of it from someone who was in the room when it went off and someone who was like watching at home and watching Twitter and people's reactions. For me, at least, like the one big thing I had was that I think that the Ace Theatre's sound system was just a little bit higher quality than Blizzard had perhaps anticipated, because it was well, it was, you know, when you're making something to be played on headphones, it's always going to be super bassy because headphones don't generate, like, typically, obviously you can get high quality headphones that generate a ton of bass, and it was so bassy in that theater. It was so bassy that I struggled to understand what they were saying. Like,
I do have to say, watching it at home, some of the lines did give me shivers. I did think that, you know, even though I didn't feel totally connected to all of the orcs, you know, like the visuals, like the iron swords rolling at each other, and like the struggles, you know, picking up Gorehowl. I did think that the sound and the music with the visuals and the pacing was, you know, really dramatic, even though looking back, I'm like, okay, who else is there besides?
For sure. Yeah, no, I think definitely that's the case. I think part of the problem was being in the theater, but everyone in the theater loved it. Like, the atmosphere in there was awesome. Like, people were really happy with it. One amazing thing was that people were super quiet during the cinematic itself. I think everyone was just watching and not wanting to miss it. And I think a lot of people struggled to hear the lines because of the bass in the theater. But people's reaction afterwards was resoundingly positive. For me personally, as someone who definitely didn't play Warcraft 3 and so therefore doesn't really get those references, I don't feel like I was the player that they were looking for with that particular thing.
I didn't play either. I mean, I'm just sort of like a hardcore, you know, WoW.
Yeah, same here, exactly that. So hardcore into WoW, but like not like I know that there was a big part of Warcraft 3 there with the sort of there was even a scene that was actually duplicated almost like frame by frame from Warcraft 3 up to this exact actual cinematic with the flames like engulfing the guy. But I think like I was disappointed that we didn't see Iral. I was disappointed that it was big manly orcs doing big manly orc things.
Yeah, exactly. And then you had Lords of War, which is the awesome. Other sort of like big manly orcs fighting each other in the gladiator arena of blood. And the preview had some other male warlords, and I was sort of hoping that the one female warlord that they added in for the Warsong clan, who apparently is going to be the focus of these like big story quests in Warlords, and is an interesting part of Nagrand. I was sort of hoping that she would make an appearance or just have some more variation, because it seemed like everything was very bloody. And as we've seen actually playing Warlords, there's a lot of nuance and variation that I didn't really see reflected in Lords of War or the trailer.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that once the, I'm going to try and, if I get the name wrong, I'm sorry, the Duratan one, because like the Duratan one, there's going to be, there was a lady in the preview there. I think that was Draka. And again, sorry guys, I'm not a huge lore person, so if I'm getting this wrong, like I'm pretty sure it's Draka. Right. You blow the horn, and like Draka's hunting horn, and she was in the Lords of War thing, so I'm hoping that she's going to be a bit of a bigger part of that one. And that maybe we'll, you know, just, and I mean, it's like, it doesn't matter enormously, but it's nice as a female WoW player to be able to feel like awesome and part of that. And how badass you feel when playing your male characters as a male player is how badass I feel when I'm playing female characters. So it's
or even the Alliance. I mean, I know these characters because, you know, I've seen Gorehowl, I work on this site, but you know, I'm sort of like, okay, you know, how do I as a player fit into this narrative?
Yeah.
Like, it felt like a really awesome movie trailer.
Yeah, it was really awesome.
I fit into this.
Yeah, exactly. And it's sort of, that's kind of why I was saying I didn't feel like it was I don't feel like I'm the player who that was pointed at. Like, apart from the Warcraft 3 side of things, I play a ton of female orcs, but it's sort of, I don't think it was aimed, it didn't make me want to play the game. I want to play the game because I played the beta and it's awesome and the PvP changes sound fantastic and I'm so excited about dungeons and raids and everything that's coming in, and that makes me want to play the game. But the trailer didn't sort of make me go, oh yeah, I want to play this game like
you know, with Cataclysm, like Death is evil, I'm
gonna go punch that dragon in his metal face, his stupid metal face, or like, you know, the Illidan one from Burning Crusade, maybe like, oh my god, yeah, that's so cool. And it's just didn't give me that sort of, oh my god, I want to play this feeling like previous ones have. But everybody's different, and you know, I'm sure like there's a ton of people out there who absolutely loved the trailer, and absolutely love Lords of War as well, which by the way I thought was awesome. Like, I love the art style.
Really cool.
Yeah, the art style was fantastic. The story was a little bit wow, dude cuts off his hand with a stone. I was like, wow, that's kind of intense. But like one good thing, particularly as someone who's not a lore nerd, as I keep saying, I will now remember the Shattered Hand. My God, I'm going to remember that story forever. It's etched onto my brain permanently, and that's really cool. And I was saying to Terran Gregory, who's one of the guys who makes the cinematics, like my one disappointment is that they're not going to be doing all of the clans, because I'd love to have that level of knowledge for all of them to like understand the history and understand the background. And it makes the game exciting for me. That when I see those guys with the blade fists, I'm going to be like, oh, I remember this. I remember this story. I have an association now. And that's really cool to me.
Yeah, another thing I thought was cool is that I thought it was really nice how they turned this into like an actual event at this really awesome theater, and they had the devs on the stage. And they turned it into an event as opposed to just, I think for Mr. Pandaria, we found out about the date when it showed up on the collector's edition page.
Yeah, it was something
when
like
they had the trailer at Gamescom. And that was nice, but I just feel that this was more of like a full-fledged, awesome, really polished event that sort of brought the community together watching
Definitely. It was really fun, and it was amazing to be able to be there. Like it's great to sort of be local to the area and able to go up there for them and just talk to so many fans. And if you're watching this and I saw you there, thank you for chatting to me. It was really awesome to meet so many people and give you all wristbands. Yeah, so speaking of Gamescom, there's actually, obviously we had the Mr. Pandaria reveal there 2 years ago, and this year we've had Tom Chilton hanging out there talking to a bunch of people. Our friends over at Vanian, Patrick over at Vanian, has put up a couple of videos that he's recorded as part of the interview process there at Gamescom. Basically, they do these group interviews, so you all go hang out in a room as a group, different fan sites with one dev or two devs. And they have been talking to Tom Chilton, who is like the head honcho of World of Warcraft. And he's been talking about a couple of things, the first one of which is the legendary quest. So it's this time around, it's not a cloak, it's ring. So Perk, what's your perception been of the reaction to this?
So it's been mixed because we've always known that another legendary was coming in Warlords of Draenor in the style of Mr. Pandaria. So that discussion has continued of, great, can we improve upon Mist experience and have this be something that, it worked well. I liked working towards this goal. It avoids loot drama. But then you also have people going, how's this going to work? Like, this is another legendary without a cool item. And I know that there's a cool effect associated with it. So I think that made people happy. But yeah, it's sort of been a mixed bag of people saying, well, if you like Mr. Pandaria, you like this one. But if you didn't love Mr. Pandaria, then you're sort of not really thrilled with this ring, which can maybe take a while to get if you're an alt. But something that people should like is that I believe that they're talking about other legendaries from various challenges, so that should please people that didn't just want everyone to be able to have a legendary.
Definitely, and he's talking about that in the second video, which again you can see them on Wowhead. We're going to link to all of these in the description, so it's all there. And it's talking about just getting them from difficult challenges, which to me that's great. Like if there's a challenge you can do as a group or on your own in order to get a legendary, it's kind of the best of both worlds. So you've got the ring for the people who love the Mr. Pandaria style, and you've got the you've got the big sort of legendary items. Who knows what they'll be? Maybe they'll be weapons or something like that. We haven't seen any trace of them in the data so far, have we?
Yeah, I think they've tried to be purposely quiet about everything. Even the stuff we have data mined with the ring, like we haven't data mined the legendary ring. We've just seen a few associated dungeon quests.
Yeah, we've seen a bunch of quests. So we've had like some involving Khadgar, haven't we? As the start points, like I think the starting quests.
There's been a few legendary items that you have to loot for various things. I think there's one for like Terran Gorfiend or like the Blood so and so. So we have like the quest items that are marked as legendary, but not the actual thing you get.
Have we seen any real clues? Like I'm trying to think through the items that we've seen. We've seen a bunch of rings, which actually made me suspect earlier on that it might well be a ring, but I don't know that we've seen, like for example, we haven't seen the gem that they might be able to do. Do we think we're going to go down that same route?
We don't have any achievements either.
Yeah, that's true.
The gems are tricky because I think, well, it's interesting because since they're trying to make sockets something that's not 100% on every item, if the legendary ring had a guaranteed socket, that would make it pretty awesome. So, we'll see. But they do seem to be wanting to cut back on, sockets and customizing things.
Yeah, but that could sort of be a good way for them to offer that interim cool thing as well. That's something that players really want to shoot for, but they don't actually get the ring itself until a later point. That could be something that they could definitely do. So one of the other things that Tom Chilton spoke about, which he alleges in a later video he's been talking about for a while, was the final boss of the expansion. And
yeah, I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, exactly. So I was about to say that if it's spoilers, then, you know, stop watching now, but you're going to find it really hard to avoid this because it's everywhere. So if you're watching this, you've probably already read the post on Wowhead, but just in case, spoilers, pause for spoiler people to leave, it's Grommash. Like, I agree with Perk.
Orcs.
More orcs. Oh, yeah. I kind of agree with Perk here. Like, I hadn't heard about this. Like, I'm pretty sure I hadn't heard about this in the past. I'm pretty sure it wasn't announced at BlizzCon that he was the final boss of the expansion. And we, like, Perk, between us, we keep up on the news pretty well for World of Warcraft. So I'm a little bit confused there. Like, if neither of us are like, no, we're pretty sure we didn't hear about this, then I'm wondering if it was actually announced at BlizzCon like he said.
I mean, perhaps there were some hints that, like, oh, you'll fight Hellscream again, or the Warlords are a major part of raid progression. So maybe it was in a general sense. But it seemed to be a shock to us and to a lot of other people that followed the news too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of interesting there. But, I mean, my sort of reaction is very much what Perk said when we would first mention the name, is like, oh, yay, more orcs. Like, this doesn't excite me very much. And Ian Hezekosis was on Twitter saying, you know, it's going to be very different. It's not going to feel like the Garrosh fight. It's going to sort of be really different and new and exciting. And I'm curious to see how they do it. But I'm just sort of like this feeling of inevitability of moving through the expansion towards another orc final boss is not as exciting to me as it could have been if it was either A, not announced, or B, something new entirely.
Yeah, and this also goes back to the faction concerns we talked about with the trailer, how even if we can say, oh, these orcs are not the Horde, there's some separate variation, you know, they're the villains of this expansion, players are going to associate and say, oh, you know, I've seen an orc Horde boss in Mr. Pandaria, you know, Thrall is a mostly Horde figure that I've seen in Cataclysm, this is another orc. People aren't going to make the difference that, you know, these look like the Horde, but it isn't the Horde being taught.
No, I completely agree with that. That's absolutely right. And like, you know, Prowl was trying to be more of a neutral figure in Mr. Pandaria, but as someone who's played both sides, even as like a Horde player, I see Orc, I think Horde. Like,
exactly.
And I don't think that's unfair or unreasonable. Like, much as Blizzard attempts to push it so that Thrall is not necessarily an Orc leader, he's a neutral guy, and, you know, the idea that these guys are the Iron Horde, it's not the Horde. It's like, no, these are Orcs. Orcs are part of the Horde. Like, you can tell me that they're not a Horde until you're blue in the face, but no, they're Hordes. They're Orcs, you know? It seems weird to try to punch this distinction home. It's just like, I'm really hoping that 7.0 will be a movement away from orcs, and that we're not going to see too much orc stuff going on in this expansion. The one thing that I would say about, sorry, it's just reminded me about something with the Laws of War thing. How exciting was it to see a Draenei when Vindicator Murad was there? And it was like, he's talking to Barry, and we're like, yes, my God, Alliance!
It's finally Draenei representation.
We were talking, I was like, oh my God, Alliance, this is so exciting, and then it was orcs. Anyway, never mind. I'm sure it'll still be a fun expansion. I'm really looking forward to it, but that sort of soured it a little bit for me to hear about that. And speaking of raids, we've also had, via Vanian again, the raid release schedule with his second video interview with Tom Chilton. So it's a little bit slower than we've come to expect. So
I'm really happy about that.
Oh my God, I'm so happy. I was tweeting about how happy I am about it, talking with Ian on Twitter, and just saying, to me, this is awesome. Like, not to have that feeling of this sort of cloud looming over my head of, God, you have to level really, 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 really fast in order to get into the raid as quickly as possible. To have that extra time is awesome. It's really, really good. I'm super happy.
And it makes Blizzard's work shine as well, too, because now for the first few weeks, you can level up quickly, and then you can look into working on other things without having to worry that the time you're spending raiding is conflicting with your time doing other things. And I think it will make... At Mr. Pandaria's launch, there was a lot of perceptions that, you know, the dailies were terrible, or like the tillers were awful getting maximum food. And while those areas of content did have issues, I think that if people had more breathing room, they would have realized that a lot of those systems were fine as is. It's just as we're trying to do everything in the expansion in the first week, it's a bit too much.
Yeah.
So I think that this will let players have a better perception of the content, and they won't feel as burned out or overwhelmed instantly if things are better paced out.
Yeah, definitely. So you've got a fair while to wait. We've got the 11th, the 13th of November, because of the EU date way round, I keep doing that. The 13th of November, so 2.5 weeks later, makes the release of Heroic Normal High Maul, which is the Mist's normal flex. And I don't know how long it is that we're going to have to keep making that comparison and linking those two together, but it's really tiresome. So that's going to be out on either December 9th for the US or December 10th for the EU. And then we've got 3.5 weeks after launch then for Mythic and presumably LFR. So that's December 9th and 10th. And so there's actually a really nice amount of time there for players just to level up. And I'm sure that if you're part of Method, Blood Legion, Envy, Midwinter, Scrub Busters, Exorcist, any other like top guild, and even the sort of, not the top 10, but the top 100 guilds, there's going to be a bunch of pressure on you in that time to get as much done as possible, get your garrison, get your outs, get all of this stuff together in order to maximize your gear. It's still nice, I'm presuming, to just have that extra time, to just have that little bit of extra time to do the stuff, get everything, get your ducks in a row, and then dive into raiding for real a little bit later. I mean, like, what's you're in a top 100 guild. Yeah. What's your take on it?
So the release schedules, mid-November reminds me similar of Wrath of the Lich King, where it was mid-November, and then around Thanksgiving for the US, we were trying to, level up, get all the normal modes cleared, and Thanksgiving was also around this time as well. And that was a bit awkward for us. And then right after that, after we rushed to get everything done, it's like, okay, well, now Christmas is coming up and we're trying to, work on like SAR 3 and Immortal and everything else. So I found that was a bit sort of crunchy in that period. I mean, holidays are bad. There's no way around it. We had a similar situation with Ice Crown. I think, we started doing Ice Crown Citadel and then there was this Christmas break in the middle. Yeah. But I think that getting rid of the crunch, if the holidays are always going to be the sort of evil in the middle, getting rid of the crunch around the same time to level up should release some of the pressure. So you only have the holiday stress to deal with as opposed to the, okay, let's level up and, deal, Thanksgiving rush. Yeah. And, hey, I like doing everything in my guild and I can't now. I'm starting off the expansion feeling sour, etc.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really good. And like from the perspective of someone who doesn't raid such a sort of high level, it's great. Like it gives me the time to, just like Perk was saying, get my other stuff done, get characters leveled, and just to be a bit more relaxed about it and not feel this pressure to be like now with everything.
Yeah. It could also get rid of some gear stress, because I remember that even with Cataclysm, if we were trying to raid right away, people that, had jobs where they couldn't take off, they would get into the raid and be like, well, my gear is, worse because I haven't spent the past week, running dungeons for fun. Yeah. My gear is slightly behind. I prioritize where I ran dungeons and my professions aren't up. I just simply don't have the time, as this working adult. But I think letting people get some gear through other means before the raids open should help. Like, if they're talking about challenge modes, giving sort of LFR quality loot for the daily quest, or maybe you get some special things from garrison or crafted items. People should have more equal footing trying to, tinker around for 2 weeks as opposed to just one, where you only have like dungeons and you're rushing to do that and get all the consumables. Yeah,
definitely. And I think the LFR rewards from challenge modes are a really good thing. I know that there's been some sort of response of, okay, so challenge modes are some of the hardest content in the game. Why is it only rewarding LFR level gear? And to me, it seems like because it's 5-man is kind of the response to that. And I don't think that people should feel like, obviously, if you're in a guild the caliber of Perks, you're going to have this feeling of I should be doing this, I should be able to do this. But if you're someone who is in a sort of more middle of the road guild, rather like me, and then you're going to have this sort of thing that challenge modes are an option, but LFR is an option too. And obviously, you're going to go in and you're going to try to do your challenge modes and get that LFR quality gear. But it sounds like from the way that we've heard that it's going to be distributed, you're not going to be able to go in and like farm them like all day and actually get gear. It's going to be running off of a daily quest, right?
Yeah, so it's similar to how Mr. Pandaria gives you a generous amount of Valor points for finishing a challenge mode. And since Valor points are going away, they're giving you a better incentive in Warlords. So you get like a piece of gear as opposed to a bunch of Valor points that you could use to, buy a mob piece of gear.
Yeah, and that's going to be based off of a daily quest, similar to the ones that you used to get in Violet Hole back in Dalaran, apart from it's go and do this challenge mode. So that's a really nice way to sort of limit that feeling of, oh God, I have to grind out 1 million challenge modes a day to try and get that one piece of gear that I need. So after those first 2 raids come out, we were actually hearing also from Tom Chilton about the interval then between the next raid, which I believe is Blackrock Foundry. So we have sort of said, he said several weeks. And we went onto Twitter, we were chatting away about how I was hoping it was going to be longer. And I said it would be nice if it was 8 weeks. And Ian Hazakostas, who's the lead game designer running mostly the Encounters team, came back and said that it would be something along those lines. He didn't say exactly 8 weeks, but he said it would be similar to that. So that's fully let's call it 2 months and say that we're going to be getting it in early February. And how do you feel about that? Is that a good thing? Because I'm in the good thing camp for this.
I'm in the good camp too. So for Mr. Pandaria, I remember I was basically finally catching my breath, settling down with all this, news and database updates. And 3 weeks after Miss launched, we were data mining the 5.1 patch. And with people feeling stressed already, seeing all this new content that they had to do was just, it wasn't sort of good for morale. It just made people feel very stressed that they hadn't done anything yet, and now there's even more coming.
Yeah, the addition of the factions particularly, I remember that feeling of just being like, oh my god, I'm not even, I haven't been grinding rep at all, I've just been PvPing and taking the gear off that, 'cause it was only a little bit lower than the stuff that you got from the 5.0 reputations. And then to have this landfall reputation introduced was just like, oh my god, I'm so far behind, I can never catch up, and I like to play several characters for PvE.
And there were so many bosses in Tier 14, and while they did stagger it, it just wasn't enough time between Mogushan and then Heart of Fear.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And even though Siege of Orgrimmar is going on way too long, I feel that Tier 14 was too short. A lot of guilds that are, farming Siege of Orgrimmar didn't really finish Tier 14 or didn't really, feel comfortable as they were clearing it. They weren't really doing that, farming it regularly. They, cleared it a few times before the next patch hit. Yeah. And I feel like they just could have spaced that out a bit better so people could, enjoy all the pet battles, the new professions, the exploration, the rare spawns, your tillers, and then still feel like they were raiding and they didn't have to sacrifice, raiding on their, few days a week versus doing other things in the game. So this feels a bit better how, if you do like raiding, you can level up, do something fun for the first few weeks, progress on those initial bosses. Maybe you get, good at them, and then you can relax and try other parts of the game and then go back and refreshed after the holidays to the, next raid opening up.
Yeah, definitely. And I completely agree from my perspective as well. I also think that there is merit there for Blizzard to allow people to not focus with this sort of full, 100% focus on raiding and having to do that for the speed, for the leveling, for the gearing, for the profession building up, to gather your, resources and materials, to get your food, to get enchants, all of that sort of stuff. That laser focus on raiding is kind of damaging for the game in a way, because while people love raiding, and that's awesome, there's so much else to do in the game, and almost forcing people with the speed of content releases to have this laser focus on raiding if they want to progress. Blizzard are sort of almost negating the other aspects of the game which make it so much fun. I don't know about you, Perk, but if I'm leveling a character in order to get it ready for raiding in that first week, then I'm not able to enjoy the scenery. I'm just like, oh my god, where is the quest giver?
Yeah, exactly. I was always I would just sort of, level up and then try to find a group for dungeons and do everything in the most efficient way possible. And then I'd start leveling in alt to get the, the herbs I needed or the ore, see if the profession I had was good for what this content patch was shaping up to be. And then when we were more in farm mode, a few months later when the bosses were dead, then I'd be like, oh, let's try these achievements, or, now I'll go back and collect vanity gear I want, or, get these mounts from other places. Definitely. But it was definitely okay, well, I have to focus on this one thing and, not sort of take my time and take the scenic route. I have to, map out, what's the fastest way to get everything done. Definitely. And then I have to get all this done. And then I have to raid.
Yeah, exactly. Ghostcrawler tweeted in the past about one of the biggest things that surprised him leaving the MMO scene is how focused players were on the most efficient way to do things. And I do think that there's an element of Blizzard's game design and the speed at which they release, particularly these early raids in the past, that has forced players into that almost. If they want to do this this thing which is arguably the principal endgame content in World of Warcraft. There's obviously other stuff to do, but this is the big thing, this is, if you think of endgame content in WoW, most people think of raiding. And by pushing the speed focus in, it's made people have to be efficient if they want to participate at a certain level. And I think that it's a really good change to just give people a little bit more breathing room and a little bit more time to do this stuff. And I really applaud the release of it in February, if that does turn out to be exactly. And again, just to reiterate, we don't have that exact time frame set in stone or anything, but that's where the sort of finger in the air is.
It is in 2015. We know that.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be in 2015. That much we know. But yeah, it's just nice to have it after the holidays. And I also think that for me at least, and I don't like you were way more progressed than I was at the time, but Throne of Thunder came out really early for me. And I was just sort of like, we're not even close to done.
Before.
Yeah,
like, because we're still on Shaw of Fear, and it's like, oh look, Throne of Thunder's here.
Exactly. Like for my guild, obviously we're way slower moving. We were getting through Heart of Fear, and we hadn't really even touched Terrace at that point. So obviously, and then also you had the attunements there, so you had to actually complete it. And we were just sort of like, oh my god, there's a whole raid we haven't even looked at yet. This is way too early. And then to sort of have that Throne of Thunder appear so soon, and then like Siege of Orgrimmar didn't feel too bad. Like we were like sort of getting through Throne of Thunder at that point. Still could have come a little bit later. But the silly thing is that after that we've now had, what are we going to end up with, 13 months or something crazy?
I know. I think it's 14.
Yeah, no, I
feel like for me, like I was trying to do an alt raid in tier 14, I just couldn't because we're pretty much like nonstop data mining and fixing things from September to like 5.2, and there was like pretty much something every week with like maybe a 2-week break in like September and November. So I've been sort of gauging my progress, and it's like tier 14, I didn't get much of anything done. Like I tried, I had to like cancel stuff. It just didn't work out. Throne of Thunder, I started being able to plan my schedule a little bit better. 5.4 was obviously a lot, but I was getting more stuff done. And now in 5.4, I've managed to get so many things done.
Oh my god,
Everything off my mop bucket list.
Yeah, for sure. And I just feel like if they had like pushed Throne of Thunder back a bit, and they could have pushed Siege of Orgrimmar back a bit, we wouldn't have been here for 14 months. And I'm hoping that this is what they're going to do. Like they're going to be a bit sane about it, and a bit like sort of thinking, okay, where are we with 7.0? Do we need to actually, like, I don't mind if they have the raids finished and they're just sitting on them so that people don't go crazy and feel like they have to do 17 bosses at the same time. I don't mind if they're done and we don't have them.
Smarter, as opposed to saying, okay, here's 16 bosses in September and like 10 reputations, and now November here's like a huge content patch with like Brawlers Guild and reputation. But they can be like, hey, you can level at launch and then try out this raid, in month 1, and then in month 2 you get this other raid. Like I think that's a lot smarter than saying we have to release huge chunks of things every 2 months that people can't get through, and then when they try they'll be like, oh, this is old anyway.
Yeah, and I mean also it's important to remember, like for people who are thinking, oh man, but I really like having the different raids, like if you remember Blackwing Descent and Bastion of Twilight, you had those options there that you could do different things. They've been talking a lot about how they want to do non-linear raid structures in with the first ones, and we've seen that already from the maps, bosses. We've seen very non-linear raid structures coming in. So you're not going to have that horrible thing of, oh, we're stuck on this boss, so now we have to wait a whole month or 2 months for the next raid to come out. So you're not going to be in that position anymore, which is cool. I think that's really nice. And of course, there's still the potential to get stuck on a boss, but it's less of a sort of problem when the whole raid isn't one straight line from boss 1 to boss whatever. It's much better. It's absolutely better. Anyhow, we have to move on. We're trying to keep these shows under an hour.
So many news.
I know, so many news this week. Such news, wow. So we always do this segment every week, and we wanted to tell you about what's new on Wowhead. So beta key giveaways continue, and this time we are on the Ring of Blood, which is oddly thematic, actually, given the Lords of War thing. Like, accidental relevance. Go for us.
Gladiator arena, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So what are we doing? It's just completing the achievements from any expansion, right? The equivalent Ring of Blood stuff.
So you've got that mop scenario, and then you have the Cataclysm one in Twilight Highlands, and then there's the achievement for doing the Wrath and Burning Crusade ones.
Yeah, so easy as that.
Pick any.
Pick any one of those, get them done, get your character verified, enter the contest, win a beta key, hooray. And now I know you guys have been doing a ton of work on the Wowhead client, which is a thing, like just explain to people what exactly it is that the Wowhead client does and what we're using it for with the beta.
So the Wowhead client lets you collect data that supplements what we get from data mining. So things like NPC locations, or what an NPC drops, or what a vendor sells. We can do wizardry and put that in ourselves, but it takes a lot longer. So we need you guys to, explore into the world on the beta, kill the rare spawns, find the vendors selling the quirky items, get that data, and then upload it to Wowhead. And then when we do things called data pushes, your information will then be on Wowhead. So we've made the changes so our add-on works on beta, and we've started uploading the first batch of data so you can see, like Bashiok's NPC, there's a map, and he's in the southern part of Gorgrond, and he drops this interesting tree that dances. You can see all that information on the pages now, like they're much more fleshed out, and we really appreciate that, and the more information we have, the better things are for everyone.
Absolutely. So that's you actually contributing to Wowhead, and we are super, super grateful for that. So get the add-on, download the add-on, install the add-on, run the add-on when you're playing the beta, and particularly if you've won a beta key from us, we'd love to see you doing that so we can get some data out of it. And it's going to help everyone. Like Perk says, it's why we love our users so much is because you guys build the site with us. It's not just us digging through data. And we've also been doing more work on the advanced item filters. We discussed this a little bit last week. What's new now? What have we got this week to talk about?
So everything's live.
Yay!
So I tested all of the bugs, and I found a bunch of very bizarre things happening. And devs are awesome, and they fixed them. So basically, because Blizzard changed how items work, we had to refactor how all the items filters worked. For example, if you go to Siege of Orgrimmar, there was like one page for every version of an item, but now they just smushed that into one page for everything with different variations. So we had to trick the filters into showing multiple variations. If you're like, hey, I'm searching in this item level range, like now you see all the variations that fit into that one range, even though they all link to the same page.
Wow,
so that works for like raid items, dungeon items. We learned with the system that like all dungeon bosses, I think, drop the same loot, but depending on your level, like they scale up or down. Something like that. It seemed interesting, but basically there's like 5 different versions of the same dungeon piece for like level 90, 92, 94, 97, etc. So, you can filter for that, and it will show you the specific versions you want in that range. And we also have things working for stat filters. An interesting thing about Warlords is that the stats on your items change based on your spec, like agility or intellect, or, like strength or intellect if you're like a paladin. So we had to do some extra work to get all the stat filters working. So if you're like, hey, I only want to see like agility items above this thing, it will take all those weird hybrid items into account. And then if you're like, I only want to see things above a certain item level with the stat, it will be like, okay, we'll like show you only the mythic version of the agility item. We'll like just scale it up for you automatically. Yeah. So it's really cool. Basically, everything works the same as it did before, except it took a lot of work. And we're really happy and proud that we've gotten stuff done really far in advance, 3 months before. This is awesome.
Absolutely, yeah. This is part of Perk. This is why we love doing this show, is that we can talk to you about all of the hard work, particularly from Perk. Like I help with this a little, but she does all of this hard work to keep things running. And it's always like the more work you do, if you're doing a really good job, nobody notices it. And that's exactly what Perk and the devs are doing, is they're doing a really good job to get us all of this stuff working super well for users to actually see things behaving like they think they should. So great job, guys. Moving on, we've got a ton to cover this week. So we had these new troll models. I think everyone have forgotten now about the troll models.
That was right before.
I know. I was going through the week's news to put the show notes together for the Wowhead Weekly show, and thought, oh my god, we've had troll models as well. I'd completely forgotten with all the excitement about the cinematic and the release date and the interviews and everything. We've got about the poor old trolls. So we've had both the male and the female trolls released, and I think they look great. I mean, I don't have a ton of male trolls. I don't play a ton of male characters, but male trolls are one of the ones that I do play. I have a male troll monk, and I think they look awesome. The female troll, there's been a bit of sort of feedback that I've been seeing that she's very much harder and more savage in the face. And do you agree with that? It seems like she's less soft.
I mean, yes and no, because it seems that there were some troll face models that I just thought looked really bizarre in the past. So it seems that there was like this one very pretty soft face, and the rest didn't really seem to fit that well. So it seems that they're sort of meshing them together and be like, okay, we want this troll to have sort of a savage look to her, as opposed to one, supermodel face and the rest sort of looking squished together and like something wasn't totally polished on them. So, I mean, I think that's the intent. We haven't actually seen them in the beta yet, so we can't see the range of their facial models. Maybe they picked a really angry face for the preview.
Yeah, maybe. And there's definitely one of the frowny faces. It's not one of the really ugly faces, the sort of really lined and sort of like almost gargoyle-esque faces that you have the option for female trolls. but it's also not what the supermodel face, the real pretty face. And I don't know, it's be interesting to see. They definitely look like they've relaxed the very sort of stiff stance a bit. Like they look a little bit more natural and a little bit less sort of stickman in the preview that we've seen. Obviously, just an art craft, like Perk says. But I'm really happy about that, and I hope that we're going to get some better eyes and a better run animation, because the female troll run animation is terrible.
Yeah.
I know a bunch of people were unhappy to see that the male one was still really stooped, but I think it's very true to the old model. I think
that's his character, and it would look really weird if suddenly he was upright, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And also be about 15 feet tall, you know, in sort of human equivalents. He'd be so huge.
I don't know what the armor would look like. It would be like stretched in parts.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. That would be really weird. So we're definitely, you know, we're excited to see that. And that means we've actually had previews of all but the Night Elf male for what we're getting at launch. So obviously we've had confirmation that the Blood Elf models aren't coming at launch. But we've seen everything apart from the Night Elf male, at least in an Artcraft preview now. So overall, like, are you feeling like they're getting these right, excluding the Night Elf male?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sort of anxious about the Night Elf male just because I think they look very silly currently.
Yeah, they do.
I love the Night Elf females. They're very sort of elegant but powerful, but the males just sort of look bumbling and, I don't know, sort of clumsy.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, so, I mean, it's interesting because when you move from the Artcraft to in-game, things change. Like, I love the Night Elf female Artcraft, but then in-game, I'm like, they all look very sort of stiff and like weirdly surprised. But I mean, I like how they're explaining things in the Artcraft. I think that the previews all look great. You know, you can tell they put a lot of time into things. And what I'm also really excited about is how they've been expanding things with the updated character faces.
Yes.
Recently on the beta, they changed different faces, facial expressions, Night Elf females. Like, a lot of my complaints about them, you know, have evaporated. I think they look really nice now, variety of emotions. So I think seeing the Artcraft and then seeing how they further iterated on that based on player feedback has been really good. It's been a really positive experience seeing how the models have continued to grow.
Definitely, and there's been some really good feedback that I've been seeing as well from people who play Draenor, people who play Draenor often love transmog because the Draenor characters are so pretty. And they've been really, really happy. Friends of mine who do a lot of Draenor stuff have really, really loved seeing the faces change and become more like what they're used to seeing. And the one thing I haven't seen yet is my X-face mage face. I'm still sad.
I know, I was going to ask you about that. Maybe they're only doing a few races at a time.
Maybe, exactly. Like, I haven't noticed a ton of difference with the undead female, so I'm really hoping that they get my mage back to her former glory. I'm going to be switching that model off, Blizzard. Just you wait. And obviously also this week we actually had a build, so we didn't only have the cinematic. We didn't only have the announcement of the release date. We did. It feels like forever ago. Like, we were talking earlier about how we'd done something around the day of the build, and you know, we're like, oh god, it's been like 2 weeks, we should chase that. And no, it's been like 4 days. So yeah, we had a build this week and everyone has forgotten about it. So we've had a bunch of cool stuff, and obviously whenever we do the builds, we put together the we put the build in and we build up the post and we start adding in highlights. So you can see all the highlights in the build post, but the ones we wanted to talk about, we saw this thing, and now this is an interesting one, and I wanted to bring this up because it kind of is some information a little bit as well on how data mining works and what people consider good data mining and bad data mining. So the tiny cow mount model was something that was added to the data. We saw the tiny cow in the previous build, right? We saw an actual tiny cow.
Yeah, it was a battle pet, and it was tied to an achievement for the barn, I believe.
Yeah, exactly. So we saw that come in the previous build, and this build we saw a mount. And we immediately saw that the mount was called I can't remember exactly what the mount was called. But
it was like pygmy cow parentheses RAF.
Yeah, so that is not us assuming something. That was actually the name of the item, right? That's actually the name of the mount spell.
Yeah.
So when people, I mean, obviously I can understand that people want to correct that from Blizzard. Like, obviously, great, go out there if that's incorrect, go out there and say, sorry, no, it's not an RAF item. It's not an RAF item. This is wrong. But it's not us guessing, the data miners. It's not us guessing and making stuff up. We put out what's in the data. And if it's not an RAF item, maybe don't put brackets RAF next.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as they tweeted it wasn't from RAF, we, added that tweet to the post.
Exactly.
But even on the mount page, we've been showing the mount journal information, and it has the template for the zebra mount.
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's from this RAF, and has the thing pasted in. So it's like, well, you guys are using this RAF placeholder, so we can infer that maybe this is also
Yeah,
true to friend.
maybe,
But
just
no, as soon
maybe.
as they said something, we're just like, okay, fine, we'll
Yeah,
publicize
correct
this.
it,
Nope, nope, nope,
absolutely.
got
Change
it.
our post, tweet it out, it's fine. We're happy to do it, but it's not bad data mining. That's all. It's not our fault if you guys make that work like that. Is that all I wanted to say on it? But it's very cool that, nonetheless, to have a tiny cow mount. It looks very cartoony and very fun, and whatever the source of it is, I will be happy to hunt it down. And we also saw the Ragnaros Mount Reward Achievement. Now, that's a bit of a mouthful, but we heard it last week with the 10th anniversary celebration about the Molten Core coming and the Corehound mount, which drops off of, which was, sorry, excuse me, would be coming with the Molten Core LFR completion. Now, I had assumed that it would be something like a 100% drop rate, but it actually seems to be an achievement for completing the raid, right? It's the achievement for filling out the raid.
And there's also a pet, and apparently it's called Hate Spark, and it's this says the source at the 10th anniversary. But people are curious where that's from, if that's going to be like a bonus drop, or if that's just sort of a red herring, or weird data mining. But yeah, so the mount you get when you clear Molten Core, and there's this mystery pet that people are speculating on.
Yeah, exactly. So it's good to hear that that mount is at least, you're not going to be rolling against the rest of your LFR group for that. So you're actually just going to get it. So people would be happy to hear about that. We also saw a really cool thing that we're really, really happy about finding in there. And it's an engineering gun, I think. Is it a blacksmithing gun or an engineering gun?
I think it's just marked as like
some
sort of rifle right now. But
Yeah.
yeah, it looks really cool.
It's a Wowhead gun, and I'm going to put a picture of it in right here so you can look at it. We're really, really happy to see this little Wowhead gun with the Wowhead rocket on it. And we're not just being presumptuous. It does have the smile and the eyes and everything. So we're really, really happy to see that in the data. It's very cool, and we hope it makes it into the live game.
Yeah, sometimes they'll put models in for things like, oh, here's an engineering gadget, and here's just like a model of the gadget. So we'll see. I mean, hopefully it's its own thing versus something that's a doodad in your Gearworks.
Absolutely. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. That would be really, really cool. We also saw some cool things, which I know you've been experimenting with Transmog, which are these farmer items. So tell us about how you get those.
So there's this NPC next to your herb garden, which is a garrison building that you can unlock as you level up. And you have to collect these things called Draenic seeds, which you can get from your herb garden regardless of what profession you have. Or if you are an herbalist, as you are picking herbs, you get like 1 to 3 of these seeds from every node that you pick. And if you spend, quite a lot of gold and like 500 to 1,000 seeds, you can purchase these special farming tools like shovels and pitchforks and these sites that sort of look like the Diablo 3
like the
Souls graphic.
Malthael stuff like the cross sides.
So and Corey Stockton confirmed on Twitter that even though these are white common quality, they can be used for transmog. So of course we had to go farm these up and test it out for ourselves, and they look really awesome. And now you can be fighting a boss with your pitchfork out if you don't like him.
Yeah, your shovel.
That's really cool. That's really cool flavor that's added.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. And also we've seen some updates to the Claws of Shivala model. We still are not seeing the male-female split, which I know a lot of players were hoping for, but they are at least wearing some clothes now. They've got some loincloths on. They've got a little bit of jewelry. So I think that's a step in the right direction, although it's not quite. And I think that obviously these kind of came in. We saw confirmation from Celestalon that these came in as something of not a last minute thing as such, but late in the development cycle these were added to the game. So it's not surprising that they haven't got a finely done, perfectly worked through thing on this just yet, but I'm hoping that we're going to see additional options coming in this. There's Druids have long had this problem with transmog, particularly where you get all this cool gear and you just don't get to see it. So hopefully they'll be adding more and more to the Claws of Shivala model in the future, but it's nice to see them having a little bit of customization at least.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. So the other thing, the really interesting one, and I know that Perk, I know you're sort of collecting things and collecting mounts as well. The 250 mount reward. So what's been going on with that? It was first at Emerald Drake, right?
Right. So this was something not from data mining. So this is why it's really important that we're always watching Twitter, because sometimes the devs will try to get ahead of data mining and tease things like they'll post a picture of something they're working on at Blizzard. Or they'll just be like, hey, we're thinking of this. What do you guys think? So Jonathan LeCraft posted this picture of the 250 mount achievement, which is not data mineable yet. And he's like, oh, what about we make the reward be an Emerald Drake, which is what the green drakes in the Oculus, the Northrend instance, look like. And I mean, it's a pretty cool mount. As a night elf, I've sort of like, Emerald Dream type things, but it didn't quite sort of fit the atmosphere of, you need something super cool and unique for hitting 250 mounts. So there was some discussion about that. And then he was later teasing a few days later, perhaps this more of like a green Firehawk.
Yeah.
And people were speculating that it was going to be like a Firelands mount, but tinted green. So that's been an interesting process, and like should like players have that much of a say? Like at one point, then he made this straw poll where it was like, oh, if you guys don't want the Emerald Drake, vote on where you think it should be.
Yeah.
Should it be in an instance? Should it be on the black market auction house? Yeah. How should we get this? So that was very interesting on Twitter.
Definitely. And so, like, for me personally, I completely understand the complaints about the Emerald Drake. It's a pretty basic model, which is pretty ubiquitous. Like, one of the first mounts that for me at least, one of the first mounts that I tell people to farm up when they want to build their mount collection is the Bronze Drake that you get from, I can never remember the boss's name.
Culling of Strat.
Yeah, Culling of Strat Home. I can never remember the extra guy's name that you have to kill within the time frame for it. So you go and get that one. It's really easy to get. You get this Bronze Drake. So it's one of the first models that everyone gets. The 50 mount achieve is the Albino Drake.
Yeah.
So like that's, another one of those models that's really straightforward to get hold of. The other ones are more tricky for sure, but another recolor of that same model that it's really straightforward to people to get seems weird. And you made the great point that they don't ground mount very well.
Yeah.
They're cool in the air, but they don't walk very well at all.
Yeah, the very first people that will be getting them, like the really hardcore mount collectors, like, you can't really show them off in Draenor if it's this, big flappy dragon.
He's waddling around, like, they're cute, but they don't look very cool. So I can understand the sort of complaints there. And the Green Hawk, though, is just kind of crazy looking. Is the Elisrazor one, right? That's the basis of it, or is it?
It's the one that, it looks like Elisrazor, which
That's
is
right.
the model used for the the yellow version from Rag and then the purple version from Meta.
Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see how that one goes. And I don't know what we're going to see there exactly. What's your preference? If you had to pick between the two, which one would you take?
So I like the spiky Firelands one because it sort of fits like the Demon Hunter theme I have for my rogue, and the green matches the Warglaives really well. But I had some really cool ideas for the Emerald Drake, and I'd like to see that into just because we have so many other drakes. Like, I think it'd be really good if it was a Hyjal reputation reward, maybe get some people doing that old content because that zone was, super elaborate and developed. Or, maybe it could be a guaranteed drop from like Sunken Temple. But I really like the idea of having it be tied to something like Guardians of Hyjal rep.
Yeah.
Because, other Cataclysm factions have mounts tied to them, but that one is sort of straightforward.
Definitely. And I like the idea of, being able to add stuff into old factions so that you're not, it reminds people that there's more to this game than what's just been added this expansion, that there is the option to go back and do stuff and get older mounts, and to add a new mount to an old faction is kind of cool. It's kind of a nice idea. Personally, if I had
one more thing about mounts that I want to mention. So if you want to work towards 250 mounts now and you want to track your collection, if you are already using our profiler, you can go to the mounts tab and it breaks down like what ground mounts you have, what flying ones, what aquatic. And if you click on the manage exclusions button, you can like hide mounts from certain sources. Like if you're working towards it, but you don't want to spend any gold or money on the trading card mounts, you can just click that button and we've automatically will then like hide those items for you. Or, things tied to collector's editions, stuff that you can't, where it was only available in, other regions. I know China has some unique pets. So we have maybe 10 or so filters. And if you just, you can use those filters to see what mounts you don't have that are from sources that you like.
Yeah, it's such a useful tool. Like, if you're going for any of the mount achievements, you should definitely check that out. And, obviously once you go to those items, we've got a lot of comments. There's guides linked in the items that show you where you can get them. It's such a useful tool. The profiler is awesome, just quietly. Like, there's so much in there that helps you to get these achievements. And now when we're in a lull, and obviously, like Perk and I mentioned earlier, we're going to be putting together a post to say, these are all the things that you shouldn't miss, which are going to be going away in 6.0. So if you're looking for anything at all, really, if you're looking for something to do, There's the planner option there, which allows you to see stuff that we think you might want to get done, achievements you're close to completing, that sort of thing. So definitely go check out the profiler. It's such a cool feature, which I personally think is underused. Like
it really personalizes the site for you and, recommends things that you personally need.
Definitely, yeah. And even like people are sort of, we often get this, like people are like, oh, it doesn't do anything for PvP. It totally does. It totally does. It goes through and like looks at your gear and sees what you're wearing and recommends you do stuff with that. It's a really, really cool feature. So moving on from the mounts and everything, we've had several questions this week, which are pretty good. We had one which was interesting. Perk and I were discussing it prior to the show, actually, which comes in from Tremnen, who says, do we have any idea what the LFR item level will be in Warlords of Draenor? Now, this is particularly interesting because it's something that was discussed a lot prior to any real big information about the expansion, when they were talking about the changes to raid sizes at BlizzCon. So they kind of brought out this idea that LFR was going to be very much what they referred to as, in some forum posts, as a tourist mode. So it wasn't going to be something that people felt that they had to do to get gear, because they wanted to take it out of the gearing ladder, so to speak, and to allow people to not have to get exhausted doing the same raids over and over and over and over again. So Tremden's question is actually really interesting, and we've been looking through the data and having a little investigation on this. And Perk, what have we found? You found some items which could be raid finder items, right?
Yeah, so we were looking through, and like I mentioned, those other raid items have their, like heroic and mythic tags, and LFR is sort of theirs. It's meant to be below. Like you're not getting a low item level version of your tier set, or like a low item level version of your good trinket. It's all going to be like separate loot, separate models even. So your tier model is not found in LFR.
Yeah.
So we found some items that were item level 645 that didn't have the dungeon data attached to it, and we're like, oh, maybe these could be it. They form full sets, they look like LFR, but then we're like, is this item level too high? So
yeah,
we're not sure if maybe the item level will change, or if we're looking at the wrong page, maybe it's like 630 items. But yeah, we were surprised by the 645 items that seem to fit the models. We haven't heard anything yet, like the dungeon journal in game is empty, so right now, we'll keep an eye out on the rare quality item filter and see if gear changes in there in the names.
Definitely, yeah. So it's actually not even epic gear either, and it's blue quality gear. So those items that we were talking about, these 545 ones, are not the purple quality gear. They're a lower level again. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see. And I agree with Perk that the item level seems a little high. But obviously item levels are one of those things that it's relatively straightforward for Blizzard to change. So we could well see shifts coming there in the data. We'll be sure to keep you informed, because it's interesting for us and for our viewers to find out about these sorts of things well in advance. So another viewer question that came in from Suicidal Zebra, saying, so, yeah, it's a bit of an unusual name there. So with a release date now known, I'm assuming he means, he says no, for Warlords of Draenor, what do you think will be the major WoW news at BlizzCon 2014, if any? So, Perk, what's your take on this? What do you think we're going to hear about?
I think we'll hear a lot from other games. I think that they'll have a StarCraft expansion. They'll have, I think, a Hearthstone expansion as well, because they've mentioned, Curse of Naxx was successful. They've been hinting at an expansion, and they're saying they want things to be faster than a year. So I think we'll get a teaser there. Diablo keeps having lots of great stuff coming. There's still some features that they were talking about wanting to happen that we haven't seen live yet, so maybe we'll see some of that. I don't know if we'll see any like 6.1 stuff. I don't think we will. I think they'll just focus on all of the other games mostly. And who knows, maybe Heroes will be like, I don't know, open beta, or like new Heroes. Maybe if you go to BlizzCon, you get an invite to all the remaining betas going on for games that are still in beta.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I agree with Perk. I don't think we're actually going to see a ton of WoW stuff there. It would seem foolish.
Oh, the Warcraft movie. Maybe.
Oh, yeah, maybe we'll see something for that. Yeah, I always forget about that because it seems so far in advance. Like, it seems so far away. But yeah, I definitely agree with what Perk was saying about WoW. I don't think we're going to see a ton of Warcraft information there, because it seems like it would be foolish for them to hype. I definitely don't think we're going to see anything about 7.0 at this stage, because although we know from the Tom Chilton interviews and from other interviews and discussion in the past that they're working on it, I definitely don't think they're going to be revealing any details on it, just because, people don't have Warlords of Draenor yet at that point. We know we're not going to have it before BlizzCon. So to be like hyping up the next expansion before people have even got their hands on the one they hyped at the previous BlizzCon.
Yeah, the hype train has to be all
The hype train has to stop at stations, you know? The hype train has to slow down. Colliding. Yeah, you don't want those trains to have, like, you're going to derailment of the hype train, and that's really bad. You want your hype trains to stay on the track. So I definitely don't think we're going to be seeing any 7.0 information. I agree, we're definitely going to see a ton of stuff from, and there's a lot of other franchises now. If you actually think about it, we've got StarCraft. I would not be surprised at all to see Legacy of the Void. Diablo's got a ton of information potentially coming out about new gameplay styles. Like, we've had Reaper of Souls, and that's all been hyped up very big. The PlayStation 4 version of Reaper of Souls is due very shortly, I believe. If not this week, I think. So
yeah, I think it's the 19th.
Yeah, so I think it's coming. It's really not this week, but it is this coming week. So we've got a ton of stuff there that may well be adding new features based on that. Heroes of the Storm, I would be so happy to see it go into open beta, or even just like beta as opposed to alpha.
Oh yeah, we're still in alpha.
We're still in tech alpha.
I totally forgot that.
Yeah, like we've been in tech alpha for a year now. Like that seems a really long alpha to me.
Yeah,
and they're still making substantial changes. Like for example, the artifact system and the hero progression system changed very recently. So there's still stuff that's changing, which is big sort of alpha type changes. But I'd love to just get more people playing heroes, and like the game will get better and better as more people play it because of matchmaking.
Yeah, it seemed to come out at a very strange time. Was it like right after Diablo and then like right before the Warlords alpha? So it sort of felt like, I don't know, sort of like the sibling that's sort of been elbowed.
It's been sort of like
getting as much attention.
Exactly, like the awkward time, the one who sort of always steps in at the wrong time to do their thing. But yeah, I'd love to see more of that. I'd love to see it go into beta. I'd love to see it go into open beta even more. And obviously there's also been I say obviously, maybe not obviously, there was a trademark registered a while back called Overwatch.
Oh yeah,
and you know, rampant speculation about what that might be and whether there's going to be a new game announced at BlizzCon. So that could be something else that we'll see. But in summary, the major WoW news of BlizzCon 2014 will be that Warlords is coming really soon.
I wonder if you can even buy it there.
Yeah, like pick up the collector's edition.
You know, go to BlizzCon, get a special thing for
that would be cool.
Type thing.
That would be really cool. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a little bit of information about 6.1. Like I know we've got sort of a bunch of stuff that like the Tanan jungle, the rest of the Tanan jungle is not sort of done yet. And maybe that's coming that they would do in 6.1. Maybe we're going to see more stuff happening with the max level zones in 6.1. Maybe that little island up to the side.
There's like a new garrison building coming.
New garrison stuff. Yeah, and there's that whole island that is like later. I can't remember the name of the island.
Blood Elves?
Yeah, exactly. Blood Elves, they could be at BlizzCon. But I don't think we're going to see anything that's a huge Warcraft-related surprise, put it that way. I would be very surprised if you had anything like that. Okay, so that is us for this week. Thank you so much for watching as ever. You can follow me on Olivia D. Grace. It's down below my screen. You can follow Perculia on Perculia. It's up above her screen. You can follow Wowhead on @Wowhead. And as ever, as always, you can find all of the information that we've talked about in this week's show and all of the information about just about everything on wowhead.com. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you again next week.